The planet of Aloria was known for its breathtaking landscapes and the luminous hues of its skies that painted a picture of ethereal beauty. Among its verdant valleys and sparkling lakes lived a family that seemed to reflect the planet's natural splendor. The House of Eris stood grandly at the edge of the shimmering Lake Selene, a mansion that glistened like a pearl under the twin suns. It was here that Lila, the only child of the wealthy Eris family, spent her early years in an idyllic cocoon of love and privilege. Lila was a striking figure, even as a child. Her skin bore the delicate sheen of Aloria's natives, a soft lavender hue that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Her eyes, large and expressive, mirrored the deep blues of the planet's oceans, and her hair flowed like silken threads of silver. She was the apple of her parents' eyes, and her laughter echoed through the halls of their grand home, bringing joy to all who heard it. Her father, Lord Cale Eris, was a man of great influence and wealth. A shrewd businessman with a heart of gold, he was respected and loved by all who knew him. His success in the trade of precious minerals and rare gems had afforded the family a life of comfort and luxury. Yet, despite his busy life, he always made time for his beloved daughter, often taking her on moonlit boat rides across Lake Selene, or telling her tales of far-off worlds. Lady Leora, Lila's mother, was the embodiment of grace and kindness. Her beauty was legendary, but it was her gentle soul that left a lasting impression on all who met her. She had a love for art and music, and the mansion was filled with the soft strains of her harp and the vibrant colors of her paintings. Lila adored her mother, often sitting by her side as she painted, lost in the soothing rhythm of the brushstrokes. Life for the Eris family was as perfect as the calm waters of Lake Selene. But, as with all things, this perfection was fragile and fleeting. When Lila was just 14, a shadow fell over their lives. Lady Leora, who had been the vibrant heart of their home, fell ill with a mysterious ailment. Despite the best efforts of Aloria's finest healers, her condition deteriorated rapidly. The illness was relentless, a silent thief that stole her strength and vitality. The once lively halls of the Eris mansion grew quiet, the air thick with the weight of impending loss. Lila watched helplessly as her mother, the beacon of her childhood, faded away like a distant star. Lord Cale, who had always been a pillar of strength, was brought to his knees by grief. He spent long hours by Leora's side, holding her hand and whispering words of love and comfort, even as the light in her eyes dimmed. On a quiet evening, with the first stars just beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky, Lady Leora took her last breath. The universe seemed to mourn with them, the winds whispering through the trees and the waters of Lake Selene, stilling in a moment of profound sorrow. Lila stood beside her father, her heart shattered, feeling the world shift around her. The loss was unbearable, a wound that time could never truly heal. In the days that followed, the mansion became a place of mourning. Friends and family came to pay their respects, their condolences a cold comfort to the grieving pair. Lila, once full of life and laughter, found herself adrift in a sea of sorrow. Her father's strong arms, once her refuge, now seemed as lost as she was. The vibrant colors of her mother's paintings felt muted, the melodies of the harp replaced by a haunting silence. As the seasons changed, so did the Eris family. The pain of loss became a part of them, a scar that would never fully heal. But life, relentless and unyielding, moved forward. Lila knew that her mother would have wanted her to live, to find joy and love again. And so, with a heavy heart but a glimmer of hope, she vowed to honor her mother's memory by embracing life, however difficult it might be. She would find a way to move forward, even if it meant stepping into an uncertain future. The mansion stood on the edge of the verdant valley, an architectural marvel nestled amidst lush gardens and cascading fountains. The air was tinged with the fragrance of alien blooms that thrived in the delicate atmosphere of their home planet. It was a place of beauty and wealth, a sanctuary that had once echoed with the laughter of a complete family. But since the passing of Lila's mother, a melancholic silence had settled over the estate, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind and the distant hum of the city below. 5 years had passed since that day, and the ache of loss had dulled but never truly faded. Lila, now a young woman of 19, had grown into a figure of ethereal beauty. Her alabaster skin glowed softly under the planet's twin suns, and her large, luminescent eyes held a depth of emotion that spoke of maturity beyond her years. Her silver hair flowed like liquid moonlight down her back, a constant reminder of her lineage and the responsibilities that came with it. Her father, a tall, dignified man, had always been a pillar of strength. Yet, the years had not been kind to him. The loss of his beloved wife had aged him prematurely, his once broad shoulders now slightly stooped under the weight of his grief. It was with cautious hope and a hint of guilt that he announced one day at dinner that he had found a woman who had rekindled a spark of life in him. Lila listened quietly, her delicate hands folded in her lap. She watched her father's eyes light up with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, and though a pang of sadness tugged at her heart, she forced a smile. She knew her father deserved happiness, even if it meant sharing the life they had built with another. So she nodded in quiet acceptance, even as a sense of foreboding whispered at the edges of her mind. The wedding was a quiet affair, a stark contrast to the grand ceremonies their family was known for. Lila stood by her father's side, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion and acceptance. The woman who would become her stepmother, Serafina, was introduced with a soft, almost ethereal grace. She was beautiful, undeniably so, with long dark hair that cascaded in waves and eyes that seemed to change color with the light. Her smile was warm, her voice gentle. She spoke in soft, soothing tones, and for a time it seemed as though she could indeed bring a sense of peace back into their lives. As the weeks passed, Serafina settled into their home with ease. She moved through the mansion's halls with a practiced elegance, her presence like a gentle breeze that brought a semblance of warmth to the cold, empty spaces. She took an interest in the running of the household, seamlessly blending into the routines that Lila and her father had established over the years. She spoke of her past with a quiet sadness, hinting at her own losses and struggles, drawing a parallel to their own grief. Lila found herself cautiously optimistic, hoping that perhaps, against all odds, this woman could become the mother she had lost. However, it didn't take long for small cracks to appear in the facade of harmony. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a slight change in the wind's direction. Lila noticed it first in the way Serafina would correct her, seemingly minor things, a misplaced utensil, an unmade bed. At first, Lila thought nothing of it, chalking it up to Serafina's desire to instill a sense of order in the house. But the corrections soon grew into criticisms, always delivered with a sweet smile and a soft voice, but laced with a subtle edge that made Lila's skin prickle. Serafina continued to play her part to perfection, her act flawless. To outsiders, she was the perfect wife and stepmother, kind, generous, and nurturing. But within the confines of the mansion, she was a silent tyrant, slowly eroding Lila's confidence and sense of self. Lila found herself second-guessing her every action, every decision, trapped in a constant state of uncertainty. Lila's father, once a robust and jovial man, began to wither under the guise of a debilitating illness. His booming laughter turned into weak chuckles, and his eyes, once bright with life, dulled with fatigue. Lady Serafina, ever the doting wife, was by his side at every opportunity, playing the role of the caring spouse with impeccable grace. Yet, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The way her stepmother's eyes glinted with a cold, calculating light when she thought no one was looking, the way her smiles never quite reached those eyes, they all left a chill running down Lila's spine. One evening, as Lila sat by the window, gazing at the stars that once filled her with wonder, she overheard a conversation that confirmed her worst fears. Lady Serafina was speaking in hushed tones to a mysterious figure, her voice dripping with disdain and ambition. "The old fool is nearly gone," she whispered, her words cold and devoid of compassion. "Once he's out of the picture, everything will be ours. The girl is no threat, she's weak, naive." Lila's heart pounded in her chest, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. She felt a surge of anger and fear, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd just heard. Her father was dying, and Lady Serafina was waiting, even eager, for his demise. Worse yet, she planned to seize everything: her father's wealth, his estate, their legacy, and leave Lila with nothing. The realization struck her like a thunderbolt. She was alone in a house with a woman who wished her harm. The once vibrant halls of Lila's home were now shrouded in a heavy, suffocating silence. The curtains remained drawn, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and dance with the dim flickering of the wall sconces. The house had become a mausoleum, echoing the quiet grief of its inhabitants. Lila's father lay in the master bedroom, a pale shadow of the robust man he once was. The illness that had taken hold of him was relentless, sapping his strength and spirit day by day. Lila sat by his bedside, her hand gently clasping his frail, cold fingers. Her heart ached with every labored breath he took, a cruel reminder of the inevitable. She tried to be strong, to hold back the tears that threatened to spill, but the sight of her father, the man who had once been her rock, lying so helplessly broke her resolve. She pressed her lips to his knuckles, whispering words of comfort and love, though she knew he could barely hear her. In the corner of the room, the stepmother stood with a look of affected concern. Her eyes were dry, her demeanor composed, as if she were merely a spectator to a passing storm. She reached out occasionally to pat Lila's shoulder, offering empty reassurances that felt more like cold stones than words of solace. Lila couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. The stepmother's kindness felt as hollow as the wind rustling through the dying leaves outside. Days bled into nights, and the father's condition worsened. The house staff moved quietly, their faces drawn with sorrow. They had all loved the man who had treated them with kindness and respect, but now their only duty was to make his passing as comfortable as possible. Lila barely left his side, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and uncried tears. Then, one cold, gray morning, the moment Lila had dreaded arrived. The house was still, the air heavy with anticipation. Lila felt it before she saw it, a sudden, profound stillness. She looked at her father's face, seeing the peace that had finally settled there. His chest no longer rose and fell, his lips no longer murmured incoherent words. The room felt like it had been plunged into a deep, dark abyss. Lila's breath caught in her throat, and a soft, anguished cry escaped her lips. She clutched his hand to her chest, her tears falling freely now, a river of grief that had been dammed for too long. The stepmother approached the bed, her face a mask of polite sorrow. She placed a hand on Lila's shoulder, the touch as cold and lifeless as the man who now lay still. "He's at peace now," she murmured, her voice lacking the genuine warmth one would expect. "You should take comfort in that." But Lila felt no comfort, only a hollow ache that gnawed at her insides. She pulled away from the stepmother's touch, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. As she looked up, she saw a fleeting gleam in the stepmother's eyes, a brief flash of something that sent a shiver down her spine. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the practiced facade of concern. The days that followed were a blur of condolence visits, whispered conversations, and the oppressive weight of mourning. Lila moved through it all in a daze, her mind numb with sorrow. She avoided the stepmother as much as possible, unable to shake the feeling of distrust that had taken root. The stepmother, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos, her demeanor calm and composed. She took charge of the arrangements, her voice steady and authoritative. It was almost as if she had been waiting for this moment. Then came the day of the reading of the will. The family lawyer arrived, a stern-faced man with a briefcase full of papers. Lila sat in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, anxiety churning in her stomach. The stepmother sat across from her, her expression inscrutable. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read, his voice echoing in the silent room. As the lawyer's monotone voice droned on, Lila felt a growing sense of dread. Her father had left her everything: the estate, the business, the family wealth. It was all hers, as he had promised her long ago. But then, the lawyer mentioned a clause that left her inheritance in the care of her stepmother until Lila came of age. The stepmother would have control of everything, including the finances. Lila's eyes snapped to the stepmother, who met her gaze with a serene smile. There it was again, that glint in her eyes, a cold, calculating gleam that sent a chill down Lila's spine. The stepmother nodded graciously as the lawyer continued, thanking him for his thoroughness. Lila felt a wave of nausea, her mind reeling. It all made sense now: the stepmother's sudden kindness, her careful manipulation. She had been waiting for this moment, biding her time until she could seize control. After the lawyer left, the house seemed to close in around Lila. She retreated to her room, feeling trapped, suffocated by the walls that had once been her sanctuary. She couldn't believe her father's last act had been to hand her life over to the woman who had made it a living nightmare. The stepmother knocked on her door that evening, her voice saccharine sweet. "We need to discuss your future, dear," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Lila knew she had no choice but to comply. She opened the door and faced the woman who had stolen everything from her. The stepmother smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Pack your things," she said, her voice deceptively gentle. "We're leaving in the morning." Lila felt a cold hand grip her heart. "Leaving? Where are we going?" The stepmother's smile widened, and for a moment Lila saw the truth in her eyes: a cold, merciless desire. "You'll see," she replied cryptically. "It's a surprise." Lila felt her stomach churn with dread. She knew, deep down, that whatever awaited her would not be pleasant. As the stepmother turned to leave, Lila's mind raced. She had to find a way out, a way to escape this nightmare. But she was alone, isolated in a house that no longer felt like home. The shadows seemed to close in around her, whispering her fears and doubts. That night, Lila barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind a whirl of thoughts and fears. She knew she couldn't trust the stepmother, but she didn't know what to do. Morning came all too soon, bringing with it a sense of foreboding. The stepmother appeared in her doorway, her smile sharp and cold. "It's time," she said, her voice tinged with triumph. Lila reluctantly got out of bed, feeling as though she were walking to her doom. She packed her belongings, her hands shaking with anxiety. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw two burly men waiting. They exchanged a glance with the stepmother and nodded. Lila's heart pounded in her chest. She had to get away, but how? As they descended the stairs, Lila felt a surge of desperation. She couldn't let this happen. But before she could react, the men grabbed her arms, their grip like iron. She struggled, fear giving her strength, but it was no use. They dragged her through the front door, ignoring her cries and pleas. The stepmother followed, her expression one of cold satisfaction. Lila was shoved into a waiting vehicle, the doors slamming shut behind her. The engine roared to life, and the car sped away from the house. Lila pressed her hands against the window, watching in horror as her home, the last piece of her father, faded into the distance. The stepmother sat beside her, a smile playing on her lips. "Don't worry, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Everything will be fine." Lila felt tears welling in her eyes. She had lost everything: her father, her home, her freedom. She was being taken to an unknown fate, with no one to help her. The car sped on, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. The stepmother's laughter echoed in her ears, a cruel reminder of the betrayal that had shattered her world. As the car disappeared into the horizon, Lila's mind raced. She had to escape, to find a way out of this nightmare. But for now, all she could do was wait and hope that somewhere, somehow she would find a way to reclaim her life. The car finally came to a halt. The doors swung open, and the harsh daylight flooded in, blinding Lila for a moment. She was roughly pulled out, her eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden brightness. As her vision cleared, she saw a bleak, industrial complex looming before her. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, and the sound of machinery echoed in the distance. Lila was led through a series of metal corridors, the walls lined with thick iron bars. The place felt more like a fortress than a holding facility, designed to keep its inhabitants trapped and hopeless. Finally, they reached a small, windowless room. Inside, a large cage stood in the center, its iron bars casting long, menacing shadows on the floor. The men opened the cage and shoved Lila inside, locking the door behind her. The cold metal of the bars pressed against her skin, sending a chill through her. She collapsed onto the hard floor, her legs unable to support her any longer. The realization of her situation hit her like a tidal wave, threatening to drown her in despair. She was a prisoner, sold like a piece of property by the woman who had pretended to care for her. The weight of betrayal and loss was overwhelming, and tears welled up in her eyes. Lila looked around the dimly lit room. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The guards outside the cage eyed her with a mixture of boredom and disdain, their presence a constant reminder of her captivity. She tried to hold back her tears, but the fear and hopelessness were too much. Sobs racked her body as she curled up on the cold floor, her shoulders shaking with the force of her despair. For what felt like an eternity, Lila lay there, lost in her sorrow. Time seemed to stand still in that dark, oppressive place. She couldn't tell if hours or days had passed. The guards occasionally tossed her some food and water, but she barely touched it. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of escape, of freedom, but every plan seemed impossible, every hope crushed by the reality of her situation. As hours melded into what felt like days, the faint hum of the ship's engines suddenly grew louder, accompanied by a series of muffled thuds. The captives exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with fear. A sudden, sharp noise of blast reverberated through the hold, followed by the clamor of hurried footsteps and the crackle of blaster fire. The guards, previously languid, now moved with frantic urgency, shouting commands and drawing their weapons. Lila's heart pounded in her chest, a wild drumbeat of fear and hope. Could this be a rescue? She pressed herself against the cold bars, her fingers gripping the metal, as she strained to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The door to the hold burst open, and through the smoke and chaos, a figure emerged, a man, tall and commanding, with an air of authority and a determination that seemed to light up the room. He moved with fluid grace, his blaster firing with precision. Each shot found its mark, felling the guards with swift efficiency. His dark hair framed a face set in a mask of focus, his eyes sharp and piercing, sweeping the room, taking in the scene with quick, calculated glances. As he approached, the remaining guards scrambled to mount a defense, but they were no match for him. Within moments, they lay incapacitated on the ground. The man holstered his weapon and approached the cages. His eyes met Lila's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She saw something in those eyes, a mixture of strength, compassion, and a deep-seated resolve. He knelt by the lock of her cage, his hands working quickly to open it. The lock clicked, and the door swung open with a creak. Lila hesitated, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Was this real? "Are you all right?" His voice was deep and soothing, cutting through the haze of her fear. He extended a hand to her, a gesture of safety and assurance. Lila took his hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her in the moment. As he helped her to her feet, her knees buckled, and she nearly collapsed. The man caught her, his arm steadying her. "Take it easy," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You're safe now." He led her out of the cage, supporting her as they made their way towards the exit. The other captives, emboldened by his presence, followed suit, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and gratitude. As they moved through the corridors of the ship, the sounds of battle gradually faded, replaced by the hushed whispers of the rescued. Lila clung to the man's arm, her body aching with exhaustion, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man glanced at her, a small, reassuring smile playing on his lips. "Name's Johnson," he replied. "My team and I are with the Intergalactic Coalition. We've been tracking these slavers for months." He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You're safe now, I promise." They reached the docking bay, where a sleek, silver ship awaited. The sight of it was a beacon of hope, a promise of escape from the nightmare she had endured. As they boarded, Lila felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a sliver of relief piercing the darkness that had surrounded her. The interior of the ship was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving hold she had been confined to. Johnson led her to a small, cozy cabin. "You can rest here," he said, gesturing to the plush bed. "We'll take care of everything. Just try to relax." He gave her one last reassuring look before stepping out, leaving her alone in the quiet of the room. Lila sank onto the bed, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been clawing at her. As she lay there, her mind raced, replaying the events that had led her here. The betrayal of her stepmother, the terror of captivity, and now the strange, comforting presence of Johnson. Who was this man who had saved her, and why did she feel an inexplicable sense of safety around him? As sleep claimed her, Lila's last thoughts were of Johnson's eyes, those piercing, compassionate eyes that had seen her in her darkest moment and offered her a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt a spark of hope. And as the ship hummed gently beneath her, carrying her away from the horrors of her past, Lila allowed herself to dream of a new beginning. It had been a few days since her rescue from the slave traders, yet the memories of that dark cage still lingered in her mind like a haunting shadow. She glanced at Johnson, his calm demeanor and kind eyes providing a stark contrast to the fear and pain she had endured. He had become her unexpected savior, and now a sense of safety began to wrap around her like a warm blanket. As they sat across from each other, a meal laid out on the small table between them, Johnson broke the silence. "You've been through a lot, Lila. If you're comfortable, I'd like to hear your story. I want to help you in any way I can." Lila hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. It had been so long since anyone had genuinely cared to know her story, to understand the weight of her burdens. She looked into Johnson's earnest eyes, searching for any sign of judgment or pity, but found none. Instead, there was only a gentle curiosity and a determination to assist her. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak, her voice trembling slightly at first. "I grew up in a wealthy family. My father was a good man, but after my mother's death, everything changed. He remarried and at first it seemed like the right thing to do. I wanted him to be happy again, to see the light return to his eyes. She paused, her gaze dropping to the table as memories flooded back. But the woman he married. She wasn't who she pretended to be. She was kind in front of him, but behind closed doors, she was cruel and manipulative. She made false accusations against me, turning my father against me. It was like living with a stranger who had taken over my home. Johnson listened intently, his expression sympathetic but reserved. He knew this was Lila's moment to release the pent-up emotions she had carried for so long. He nodded for her to continue, offering a silent support. Lila continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. When my father fell ill, she saw her opportunity. She took control of everything: our finances, the household, even me. She isolated him, made sure he was dependent on her. And then, when he was at his weakest, she embezzled the inheritance that was rightfully mine. Lila's eyes glistened with tears, but she blinked them away, her resolve hardening. After he died, she showed her true colors. She sold me to slave traders, throwing me away like garbage. She thought she had won, that I would never come back to claim what was mine. Johnson leaned forward, his face etched with concern. I'm so sorry, Lila. No one should have to go through what you did. But you're not alone anymore. We'll make sure she faces justice for what she's done, and you'll get back what's rightfully yours. Lila looked up at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. But how? She's powerful and cunning. She's probably covered her tracks well. Johnson smiled, a glint of determination in his eyes. She may be cunning, but we're not powerless. We have resources, contacts, and most importantly, the truth on our side. We'll gather evidence, find witnesses, and expose her crimes. But we'll need to be careful and methodical. She won't go down without a fight. A sense of relief washed over Lila. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. She realized that she wasn't just a victim of her stepmother's cruelty, she had a chance to reclaim her life and her legacy. And she wasn't alone in this fight. Johnson was by her side, ready to help her every step of the way. As the days passed, Johnson and Lila began to forge a plan. They spent hours in the ship's command center, poring over data and contacting allies who could aid them. Johnson's team, seasoned in covert operations, worked tirelessly to gather information and prepare for the confrontation. Lila, for her part, proved to be an invaluable asset. Her knowledge of her father's business dealings and her stepmother's habits provided crucial insights that helped piece together the puzzle. Through their shared mission, a deeper bond began to form between them. Lila found herself drawn to Johnson's unwavering strength and kindness, qualities she had seldom encountered in her life. Johnson, in turn, admired Lila's resilience and courage. Despite the pain she had endured, she remained steadfast in her quest for justice. One evening, as they sat together in the ship's observation deck, the stars glittering outside the viewport, Johnson spoke softly. You've been incredibly brave, Lila. I can't imagine what it's been like for you, but you've faced it all with such grace. Lila smiled, a soft, wistful expression on her face. I never thought I'd be here, with someone like you, planning to take back what's mine. It's like a dream I never dared to hope for. Johnson reached out, gently taking her hand. It's not just a dream, it's real, and we'll make it happen. Together. The dimly lit cabin of Johnson's ship buzzed with quiet anticipation. The air hummed with the subtle vibrations of the engines, a comforting backdrop to the intense conversation taking place. Lila sat at the small, round table, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that Johnson had set up. It flickered with various documents and images, all pieces of the puzzle they needed to solve to reclaim her inheritance. Here, Johnson said, pointing to a document that detailed her father's assets and their transfer after his death. This is where she manipulated the records. We need to find proof that she coerced your father into signing over everything. Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. The weeks since her rescue had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Johnson's unwavering support and meticulous planning had brought them to this critical juncture. She couldn't afford to fail now, not after everything she had endured. How do we get this proof? Lila asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Johnson leaned back, his sharp eyes meeting hers. We infiltrate your home. I have contacts who can get us inside. Once there, we search for anything that ties her to the falsified documents, letters, recordings, anything. Lila took a deep breath, the weight of the task pressing down on her. When do we start? Tonight, Johnson replied without hesitation. The sooner we act, the less time she has to cover her tracks. The plan was set in motion. Under the cloak of darkness, they approached the grand estate that had once been Lila's home. The sprawling mansion loomed against the night sky, its windows like cold, indifferent eyes. Memories of happier times flashed through Lila's mind, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the mission. Johnson's contact, a wiry alien with nimble fingers and a knack for bypassing security systems, led them through a hidden entrance. They moved silently through the corridors, their steps muffled by thick carpets. Lila's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and determination driving her forward. They reached her father's study, a place that had once been a sanctuary of wisdom and warmth. Now it felt like a mausoleum of broken dreams. Johnson motioned for her to stay close as he began searching through the desk drawers and cabinets. Lila's eyes roamed the room, settling on a portrait of her father. His kind eyes seemed to watch over her, giving her strength. "Found something," Johnson whispered, holding up a small data chip. "Let's see what's on this." He inserted the chip into a portable reader, and the holographic display sprang to life. Files and recordings appeared, and Johnson quickly navigated through them. They found several audio recordings of conversations between Lila's father and stepmother, revealing her manipulations and threats. "This is it," Lila whispered, her voice tinged with both relief and anger. "This is what we need." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lila's heart skipped a beat. Johnson quickly shut off the display and motioned for silence. The door creaked open, and the stepmother's silhouette appeared, flanked by two burly guards. "What are you doing here?" the stepmother sneered, her eyes narrowing as she spotted Lila. Lila stood tall, her fear melting into defiance. "Reclaiming what's rightfully mine." The stepmother's face twisted with rage. "You think you can just walk in here and take back what I've rightfully earned?" "You mean stolen?" Johnson interjected, stepping forward. "We have proof of your deceit." The stepmother's guards advanced, but Johnson moved swiftly. In a blur of motion, he disarmed one guard and incapacitated the other. The stepmother stumbled back, her facade of control shattering. "You'll pay for this," she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "You're the one who's going to pay," Lila retorted, holding up the data chip. "This will expose everything you've done." In the ensuing chaos, they managed to escape the mansion, clutching the damning evidence. Back on Johnson's ship, Lila felt a sense of triumph she hadn't experienced in years. They transmitted the evidence to the authorities, ensuring that the stepmother's crimes would be brought to light. As the dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Lila and Johnson stood on the deck of the ship, the weight of the night's events settling over them. "Thank you," Lila said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." Johnson smiled, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the rising sun. "You did this, Lila. You fought for your future. I was just here to help." Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining, as they watched the new day unfold. The darkness of the past was behind them, and together, they faced a future filled with hope and love. Johnson took a step closer, his expression growing serious. "I didn't just do it because I made a promise," he confessed. "I did it because I care about you, Lila. From the moment I met you, I felt something I can't ignore." Lila's breath caught in her throat. There it was, the truth they had both been dancing around. The air between them seemed to thrum with unspoken words and emotions. She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the tenderness, and something that mirrored her own feelings. "I care about you too, Johnson," she finally said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've been my rock, my safe haven in the storm. You've shown me kindness when I thought the world had none left to offer." Johnson reached out, gently taking her hands in his. "I want to be more than just a friend, more than just someone who helped you. I want to be there for you, to share a life with you, if you'll have me." Tears welled in Lila's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. For so long she had been adrift, caught in a sea of sorrow and betrayal. But here in this moment she felt anchored, grounded by the love of a man who had shown her what true compassion was. She squeezed his hands, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I want that too, Johnson, more than anything." Without another word, Johnson closed the distance between them, pulling her into a tender embrace. His lips met hers in a soft, gentle kiss, a kiss that spoke of promises, of a future filled with hope and love. It was a kiss that erased the pain of the past and filled her with a warmth that spread through her entire being. As they pulled apart, Lila looked up at him, her eyes shining with happiness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "For everything." Johnson smiled, his thumb gently brushing away a tear from her cheek. "No, Lila," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. For letting me be a part of your life, for trusting me. I promise I'll never let you down." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the stars above them witnessing the birth of something beautiful and pure. In that quiet, intimate moment, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. They had found in each other a love that was strong and true, a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity and had emerged unbreakable. As the night deepened and the stars glimmered brightly, Lila and Johnson knew that this was just the beginning of their story. A new chapter, filled with promise and endless possibilities. Together they would carve out a future, one where they could find peace, happiness, and the love they both so richly deserved. And so, with hearts full of hope, and a love that would guide them through the darkest of times, they embarked on their new beginning, a journey that would take them to places unknown, but always hand in hand, facing the world together.